devoted all of my adult life to this subject. I only debate with my equals. All others I teach.
We think that they are foolish to allow themselves to be beaten and brutalized and do nothing whatsoever to protect themselves. They are foolish. They should have the right to defend themselves against any attack made against them by anyone. If a dog is biting a black man, the black man should kill the dog. Whether the dog is a police dog, a hound dog, or any kind of dog. If a dog is sick on a black man, when that black man is doing nothing but trying to take advantage of what the government says is supposed to be his, then that black man should kill that dog or any two-legged dog who sicks the dog on.
Should other black men
Honorable Elijah Muhammad, number one, don't believe in any form of integration, and believe that every mention of the word integration by whites, whether it be from the mouth of Kennedy on down to the mouth of the lowest, raggediest white liberal in the street who is beatnik-like involving himself in these integration efforts, if we believed in it, we would integrate. And we would fight anybody who got in our way or made any effort whatsoever to stop us from integrating. If we really believed that the law of the land, the Supreme Court, and other so-called judicial bodies were for real, when they talked about integration, we would integrate.
We were sitting around the dinner table, some students and people, and the question came to you both. Well, what is now? You guys may not believe in God or something.
I am married to an ex-nun, an ex-Roman Catholic nun. I drive her to church. 35 years we've been married a few days ago, and I drive her to church on occasion. I'll go in and listen. I'll go to the mosque. I'll go to the Buddhist temple. I go to anybody's religion because religion is a belief. Nobody has it. Now, you ask if I believe in God, you must first explain, because I met the guy that robbed my house, believed in God. He had a big cross on his chest when they caught him down at the prison. He believed that would stop him from robbing my house. Believing in God don't make you good or bad. The Ku Klux Klan believe in God. The one thing that they say that they have established a religion to protect the name of Jesus. So the whole philosophy. Most of the people in the Bible Belt will cut your throat for being black. Did the Bible
All right, can you hear me now? I appreciate that, Dominic. I did not turn my mixer on, so I've been chopping it up this whole time. You guys couldn't hear me, so I really appreciate that. Can you hear me now? There you go. I appreciate that. So what I was saying is that we're going to examine the nature of America, like how it's organized and how America wants it to be perceived and what America is in reality and what the founding fathers intended America to be. And the reason why I named the show American First is because, a lot of my peers, whether they be black, white, Mexican, or what have you, always, put their Americanness first, which I understand that because, I love the ideology of America too. I like what America stands for, the ideals of America. We're trying to be this great nation, right? Now, in practice, is it that? I don't know. We're going to discuss that. Does every nation have its flaws? Absolutely. But my contention is that I don't think most people understand like the gravity of how misconstrued things are. I don't think people understand the gravity of how misconstrued things are. So instead of taking it from me, we're going to take it from the mouth of the great Noam Chomsky, right? So we're going to go over a couple of his interviews, and I'm going to stop it every so often. If you want to come in and comment, if you want to leave a comment in the chat, go ahead. I'll try to put it up on the screen. And we're just going to go through this, and I want to know what you guys think. A lot of his views, I shared the same views even before I came to his work. And once I came to his work, it kind of cemented how I felt. You know what I mean? It was good to hear someone say it. You might disagree, but let's just talk about it. So here we go. The great Noam Chomsky, the philosopher, the economist, the linguist, the great.
How can there be thought control in a democratic society such as the United States? Isn't that a contradiction?
Well, it depends what you mean by democracy. If you mean by democracy that ordinary people should play a meaningful role in controlling public affairs and determining decisions about how the system works and so on, yeah, then it's a total contradiction. But the point is that privileged elite elements, have never meant that by democracy. They've always regarded democracy as a threat, which has to be contained and controlled. And this goes way back to the first democratic revolutions in the 17th century in England. As soon as it became clear that you're going to lose, that it would no longer be possible to control people by force, it immediately followed almost as a corollary that you're going to have to control what they think. If you have what we nowadays call a totalitarian state or a military-run state or whatever, you really don't care much about what people think. They can think anything they feel like because you can control them with a bludgeon. But as the state loses its capacity to coerce through threats or terror or just one or another form of force, then other means have to be found to ensure that democracy doesn't work. That the democratic forms, in other words, persist, but without interfering with the right of the privileged elements to rule. What the privileged elements are may differ in different societies. In modern capitalist democracies, the privileged sectors are those who own the corporate elite. They own the country, more or less. In fact, more, not less. They effectively own the country, and
I was trying to make sure you guys could hear it with my mic being unmuted and it wasn't echoing real bad. And if it's echoing real bad, let me know because I'll keep my mic off of mute. But if it's echoing too bad, I'll mute it up. So let me run it back now because I was really doing a check just to make sure. And y'all let me know if it's too bad.
Role in a democratic society such as the United States. Isn't that a contradiction?
Well, it depends what you mean by democracy. If you mean by democracy that ordinary people should play a meaningful role in controlling public affairs and determining decisions about how the system works and so on. Yeah, and it's a total contradiction. But the point is that elite elements, privileged elite elements, have never meant that by democracy. They've always regarded democracy as a threat, which has to be contained and controlled. And this goes way back to the first democratic revolutions in the 17th century in England.
Now, let's talk about that, right? He said that democracy was never intended to be, how we think of it, real democracy, right? He said that the elites never intended for democracy to work as such. They thought that democracy was a threat. Why? I think most people know why, but let's just let Chomsky elaborate a little bit on that. Let's see what he says. That's strange.
As soon as it became clear that you're going to lose, that it would no longer be possible to control people by force, it immediately followed almost as a corollary that you're going to have to control what they think. If you have what we nowadays call a totalitarian state or a military-run state or whatever, you really don't care much about what people think. They can think anything they feel like because you can control them with a bludgeon. But as the state loses its capacity to coerce through threats or terror or just one or another form of force, then other means have to be found to ensure that democracy doesn't work. That democratic forms, in other words, persist, but without interfering with the right of the privileged elements to rule.
So what is he saying here? That it sounds like what he's saying to me is that they want the appearance of democracy, right? But in reality, they want the elite to rule, right? And we're talking about the founding people, the elitists, the people that actually created America, right? They wanted the appearance. Now, why would they want the appearance of democracy and not want real democracy? Just said it, right? Because the people that's in power, they actually want to be the rulers without you knowing that they are the rulers. Why would they want that to happen? Is because the people that run the country are the people that have the power, the wealth, the land, so on and so forth. So we're going to go more into it. Let's let Chomsky keep going.
What the privileged elements are may differ in different societies. In modern capitalist democracies, the privileged sectors are those who are the corporate elite, basically. They own the country, more or less. In fact, more, not less. They effectively own the country, and they basically control the political system. In the United States, there's really a one-party state. It's a business party with two factions, and they control the media, the ideological system, and they impose very sharp constraints on any form of policy, any policy that's formulated, even if the political system ever got out of their control, which is unlikely. It couldn't get very far out because the weapons of capital strike and disinvestment and reduction of business confidence and so on are sufficient to control policy. So there's lots of mechanisms that ensure that those who own the country govern it. And we should bear in mind that that was the principle of the founding fathers, that those who own.
Now, I think that's really interesting. He's saying that, there's a lot of mechanisms in place. There's a lot of mechanisms in place that ensure that the people that actually own the country run the country, right? So there's this big propaganda machine, right, that's pushing all these ideals in front of your face. If you really understand what the founding fathers intended, then you wouldn't really fall for the propaganda. And if you understand who owns the land, and if also you understand how corporations work, like, I understand people understand how corporations work, but one of the main intents of corporation is to hide the actual human person, right? There's a lot of companies that exist that we don't even know who owns them, right? there's a lot of land that's in these companies' names that's, we don't even know who they belong to. And it's intended that way. Like, why would people do that? Right? Because they don't want to be seen. They want to be the hidden hand. Right? So a lot of these elitists, kind of like switched an identity, turned into a company, and also it removes consequences, right? If you have a corporation, a company that's actually running the world, running your business, like out there effectively doing stuff, then whenever something goes wrong, who's responsible? The corporation, not the person, right? Also, if you want to do something to one of the people that's in power, how can you find them, right? They have hidden themselves from us. We don't even know who the most powerful people are here in America. We know like the most common names, you know what I'm saying? But as far as the people with the old wealth that own a lot of land, who own the counties and the different jurisdictions and stuff like that, the cities, all these cities are last names, you know what I'm saying? These people still exist. They absolutely do. So we got to get an understanding of what the founding fathers intended for America to be and what America actually is, and where do you lie in that, right? Are you falling for the propaganda? Are you seeing through the bullshit? What we got here? What you talking about? A way of governing which depends on the will of the people. Indeed. The word people used is not about the citizen. It is for what is called nobles. Indeed. The word people used is not about the citizens. It is for what is called nobles. All right, you might have to come on and expound on that, Dominic. What else we got? True generational wealth families, true with the term hidden hand. Absolutely. So let's keep going on and see what Noam is talking about. Let's go back a little bit.
Because the weapons of capital strike and disinvestment and reduction of business confidence and so on are sufficient to control policy. So there's lots of mechanisms that ensure that those who own the country govern it, and we should bear of the founding fathers, that those who own the Constitutional Convention. That's the way the country's founded. Now, the problem is, how do you deal with all of this when people are free, as they are, like the state? They can't send in the police to break up this conversation. So how do you deal with that? Well, a lot of mechanisms are used, and one of them, primary one, is thought control, indoctrination. That's what the phrase necessary illusions comes from. It's
Now, I want to comment on that phrase, necessary illusions, and Dominic, why are your comments not showing up on the YouTube chat, but are showing up in my StreamYard chat, but I can't see them popping up on YouTube? That is strange. Let's see. That is weird. I don't know why it's doing that. Why are your comments not popping up on YouTube? So how do you guys feel about that, as far as just like, the necessary, you can see them on YouTube? Strange. How do you guys feel about just, hold on, I lost my train of thought dealing with the dang chat. Hold on. Let's see.
the state. They can't send in the police to break up this conversation. So how do you deal with that? Well, a lot of mechanisms are used, and one of them, primary one, is thought control, indoctrination. That's what the phrase necessary illusions comes from. It's not mine. It comes from Reinhold Niebuhr, who's leading.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. As far as just like, how can you be American first, right? Whenever the people that founded the country didn't consider everybody American, right? So they didn't want everybody to be included in the citizenship of America, right? And then people will say to me, well, are you going to hold people to those old ideas of what America was and what it intended to be? And it's not that now, and America is this great country, and the ideals are like was, the ideals of modernity are pushing the boundaries and stuff like that. And I say, yes, I am. I don't want to hold those people to it. But what if that America still exists, right? And they push the propaganda in your face to make you think that it's all inclusive, but in reality, we know that it's not, right? And we know what they intended by how they structured the company, right? Everybody was included in America. We became American citizens in the 14th Amendment. Even all white people weren't included as American citizens. No people of color were, you know what I mean? And I think that it's intentional, right? I know that it's intentional, right? But it will be smart of the elite people to actually let people believe that they are a part of the American, the American experiment, because then what? They have more laborers, they have more of a working class, right? They have legitimized slavery, right? Things have not changed. They have just changed in persona. They've changed in the image. The language has changed. It's just they put different mechanism in front of your face. They took the chains off of you, but things are still the same in principle, right? So yes, I love my Americanness. I love my blackness and I love my Africanness, and I see them all as equal. But we have to be real with ourselves whenever we say, I put my Americanness first, whenever there's another group of Americans that have put themselves first and don't see you as the same, right? In the beginning of my video, in the intro, right, I have a Malcolm X quote, a Malcolm X clip. And he says that he don't believe that, African Americans are real citizens, right? Are first class citizens, right? Because if Americans were real citizens, why do we need civil rights? Why do we need the 14th Amendment, right? Think about if you're bringing somebody in the constitutional fold, right? You don't have to create extra rights for that group of people. All you have to do is say, okay, all these rights that we already have are inclusive to them. But if I have to create something else that's for a different type of people, it's letting you know that you don't share the same status as these other type of people, because they had to create something else for you to even participate in it. So that lets you know that you're a second class citizen, right? And America, if you don't know, have different statuses in law. You have different statuses. You have different statuses. There's different levels of citizenship, right? There's different classes. So you just got to understand that, you are American, but you ain't the American that you think you are. And a lot of us down here fighting at the bottom, super patriotic, and don't know that you're just, the labor class that's supporting the people that's the elitists, right? And I think that we all know that in a general sense, but we got to see through the bullshit of our own, country, of our own politics, of our own propaganda, and really see our country for what it is. Because while we down here fighting amongst each other, we should be looking up top, right? And seeing why this big wealth gap exists, to see why these resources are so unbalanced, right? See what the power is distributed. See why people own miles and miles of land. Like, what the fuck is the purpose of people owning acres and hundreds of square miles of land, privately? That's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Like, the way the capitalism is set up, you know what I'm saying, is ridiculous. People should share in profits of business. I know everybody don't believe that, but it should be more cooperative instead of competitive, is what I believe, as far as the way our government is structured should be. But we can't even talk about those things because they're so demonized. They're so demonized. You can't talk about socialism. You can't talk about communes. You can't talk about these different types of systems, because they only want you to know two types, Republican and Democrat, which is one and the same, right? Have you thinking that they're against each other, right? They put these views on opposing sides of the board, and make the system be a conflict on purpose, right? We have a system that's going to be in perpetual conflict by design, right? It's set up that way. So you have to step out of the system and realize that there's other type of systems that can potentially work, right? You know, we have this hierarchical system, and the way we see it is just the political side, but there is also a hierarchy behind the politics also, right? What Chomsky was talking about, you know, these corporate powers that be that own a lot. And I don't like talking about people in terms of fictions, right? Because whenever we say corporations, a corporation is people. When you say government, government is people. But they have put these fictions in front of the people. And so we start pointing at these fictions instead of the real people. And we got to start back to holding people accountable instead of corporations, instead of government, all this fictitious type shit. Man, I don't want to talk to the corporation. Like, a corporation has standing in law. That was the other term I was looking for: standing, status, and class, right? I don't want to take no corporation to court. I want to take the person to court, right? I don't want to talk to the government, right? I need to talk to somebody. I need to hold somebody accountable, you know? Absolutely, Don. Absolutely. Let's see. Let's move forward a little bit.
Theologian. He's called the theologian of the establishment. He was the guru for the Kennedy intellectuals and George Kennan and so on, a major figure in modern intellectual history. And he pointed out once that the ordinary people don't have the capacity, according to him, to become involved in public affairs. So it's the task of what he called the cool observers, meaning us smart guys. It's our task to impose necessary illusions. And
now, this concept, I'm actually conflicted, right? So he's talking about the concept of democracy. The elitist people are saying that, we can't give these people power. They're too fucking dumb. You know what I'm saying? These people are not smart. You can't give them power. They don't know what the hell they want. And democracy is mob rule, and you don't want the mob to rule because these people are too dumb and destructive to lead anything. And I'm conflicted with that view because the more I hang out on the internet, the more I tend to believe that that's true. And that's a sad thing to say. And people think that that's an arrogant thing to say too. But I want you guys' opinion on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, can we ever have a true democracy? Because what happens? Have you ever been in a classroom? You know how that shit go. The popular people are the people that, really be running shit and be dumb as hell. You know what I'm saying? People just follow behind who they like instead of, getting behind people with the brains. You know what I'm saying? But I'm conflicted about that because it works against me too. Because I'm part of the dumb class. I'm with y'all also, right? So if I say that you right, people are too dumb to know what's in their best interest, I'm saying that we don't have the capacity to govern ourselves or to be in positions of power also. And that includes myself, but I have to take that serious. So also what he said after that, what do? Didn't they give people necessary illusions, right? That's a more current phrase, but the initial phrase was called the noble lie, right? Which Plato or Aristotle, one of those, they are contemporary, but the noble lie, give people hope, give people, these ideas and create these fictions in people's minds and have them thinking things are one way, but they are actually another. And we absorb these ideas, we accept these ideas, we are programmed with these ideas, and you don't know no better, right? When your reality is created before you, when you are born, when your reality is created before you're even born and you're born into it, you don't even know better. You don't even know what else exists, right? You don't even know a different point of how to live. You don't have a different point of reference. right? You have nothing to compare it to, right? Whenever you grow up in a capitalist system and a democracy, and you ain't never been nowhere else, what do you have it to even compare it to? So you can complain, but you don't have nothing to put it in its place. So they give us these necessary illusions and give us a false sense of power, give us a false sense of hope, which I believe the vote is. The vote is your false sense of hope. The vote is your false sense of power, make you believe that you actually have some type of substantial, substantial play, like you have some type of substantial power, that you have some type of, part in the system, which I don't believe none of us do. Like, think about it. Like, what are the substantial things that have happened from the vote and stuff like that? Like here in the present, I'm 42, and I couldn't tell you anything substantial that have happened that have really affect me, dramatically in my everyday life from politics. You know what I mean? And people will come up with these mundane things. They'll talk about health insurance. They'll talk about jobs. Didn't affect me, To explain that are no interested in the Plato's cave is wasted energy, Sally. To explain others that are not interested in the Plato's cave is wasted energy, Sally. But the few that are, which could be millions, is enjoyable to find fellow beings to share with each other. Absolutely. And that's the whole concept of like politics too. That you basically saying the same thing as what, the elitists are saying, that, some of this shit will be wasted on people who just don't have no damn sense, which is sad to say. So I'm really conflicted with this idea. I really am. I have faith in people, but the more and more I converse with people, the more I come on these panels and talk to people, not to say that I'm the smartest guy in the room, but I often see mob rule, or like follow the leader. What is it called, Dom? When like herd mentality, right? We often do herd mentality, and that's not good. Like, how many people are really thinking for themselves or just regurgitating things that they hear, right? How many times have you heard an original idea? Like, it's not that often. How many people that actually read, right? I know plenty of people who have never read a book after they have graduated high school, right? I know a handful of people who never take the time to teach themselves anything after someone stopped teaching them, school, the education system. So that tells you right there, like, the majority of the world is not motivated, especially in the lower class, right? And people believe that they know what's going on, but are not really competent enough to, move the bar in one way or the other and really understand what's going on, and just consuming the propaganda, sadly. You are a humble being. Thanks, mate. Listen, I think you're being sarcastic, man, but I just think that's the way it is, Brody. You know what I'm saying? Myself included. So, yeah, man, let's continue.
And emotionally potent oversimplifications to keep these poor simpletons on course to become involved in public affairs. So it's the task of, and then so on, a major figure in modern intellectual history. And he pointed out once that the ordinary people don't have the capacity, according to him, to become involved in public affairs. So it's the task of what he called the cool observers, meaning us smart guys. It's our task to impose necessary illusions and emotionally potent oversimplifications to keep these poor simpletons on course. And it would be kind of unfair to let ordinary people, to let the democratic process really work. If you really let ordinary people make decisions or, think about things or whatever, they'd only get in trouble. It's like letting a 3-year-old cross the street. It's to the interests of the 3-year-old that you constrain them. And similarly, it's to the interests of the general public that you marginalize them and ensure that the formal political system has not very much substance because it's only the smart guys, the cool observers, who have the capacity to make the right decisions. And those, now it turns out that the cool observers who are in a position to make the right decisions are those who serve the interests of private power. Other cool observers are not cool observers because they have the wrong decisions. He didn't bother mentioning that part. And that's a very typical view. It's not just his view. In fact, it's probably the dominant view. So, for example,
I mean, is that fair though? You know, if you are one of the elitists and you help build the country and you want to keep your power consolidated amongst your peers, is that fair? Or does it even matter if it's fair or not? Like, you know, if you bled for this country, if you put your wealth in this country and you built it up, you know, and you help structure it and you want to keep the power amongst your people, is that immoral? Is that wrong? I'm conflicted in that view also, because if I set something up, right, and I wanted my descendants to be, you know, good for, you know, eternity, or as far down as my lineage would go, I don't have a problem with that whenever I look at that situation, you know, when I put myself in that position, right? So I be conflicted, you know. There's an enigma, a contradiction, you know, because I'm like, damn, I don't want these people to be in power forever. You know what I'm saying? Fuck these motherfuckers, get them out of power, strip them of their power. You know what I'm saying? It's not fair. It's not fair. But if it was me, I probably would do the same thing. Ain't that crazy? So I'll be conflicted. What about you, Don? Like, what do you think about that? Like, if you built a country, do you think that it's okay to try to put your descendants that come after you in a position to where, you know, they could never lose their power or wealth? Like, is that reasonable or is that unreasonable? You know, I think it's reasonable, but I don't know if we should, you know. I don't know if that breeds corruption. I don't necessarily like nepotism, but if I built a corporation, I would want my family to always be a part of it. You know, so isn't that conflicting? Right? You know, I look down on nepotism. I say, fuck that. I want my people to have a shot. I want to have a shot. And these people like, shit, we built this shit. Go create your own shot. Right? And then we could talk about systemic racism and all that type of shit, but I don't want to go there. But we just talking about in a general sense, even white people against other white people. You know what I'm saying? Like, they do nepotism. Like, white people have, you know, classism in their own group. You know what I'm saying? They have different types of white people. Like, white people call themselves white trash. They got a middle class and a higher class within themselves. And then we outside of that also. So they in competition with each other also. Not to make this a race thing, but I'm just trying to look at it from all levels. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I believe that nepotism is wrong, but at the same time, I believe that I would probably practice it also. You know what I mean? Let's continue.
The book that I co-authored right before this one is called Manufacturing Consent, which borrows a phrase from Walter Lippmann, the sort of dean of American journalists, a major foreign policy critic. And his view, sort of the same, was that you have to, it's a crucial part of democracy, he said, is the manufacture of consent. And the population he referred to as the bewildered herd. And he said, we have to save ourselves from the rage and trampling of the bewildered herd. And since, unfortunately, you can't do it.
So what do y'all think about that? You talk about humble. We have to slave ourselves from the herd, from the belligerent herd. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how these people really think. But think if they didn't. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm coming to get you because I want some too. I want mine. You know what I'm saying? If I see that you got unfathomable wealth, you know what I'm saying? I might start feeling insecure in myself and say that, hey, yeah, we coming to get that. You got too much. So, you know, the elite people like put protections in place. Is that understandable? Even at the cost of us just being, the working class. Do they have that right? You know what I mean? That's crazy. Bewildered. I'm not sure, but we know it's not good. I couldn't tell you the exact definition of what bewildered means, but we know not competent, probably confused. It sounds like confused, but if you say you have to protect yourself from somebody, it's definitely not good. You know what I mean? But the thing is, what I want to ask you is that a valid position, right? If you set up a country and you wanted to keep, people in your bewildered, very confused. What up with it, Cleaner? Nice to see you, Brody. So is that fair? Is that a valid position? What you think, Cleaner? And you're welcome to come up, or you can drop it in the chat. I see you got a show coming up too, so just let me know whenever you go live. I'm gonna come over there and chop it up with you also. But yeah, man, like when I put myself in those shoes, I'm just like, man, I would do the same shit. But I'm in my shoes, right? And if I had the opportunity, I would come get some of that money. I'll chop your head off. It's an enigma. Let's move forward.
Do it by force. I have to do it by other means. The other means would be the manufacture of consent. Sort of the same was that you have to, it's a crucial part of democracy, he said, is the manufacture of consent. And the population he referred to as the bewildered herd. And he said, we have to save ourselves from the rage and trampling of the bewildered herd. And since unfortunately you can't do it by force, you have to do it by other means. The other means would be the manufacture of consent. The United States, the public relations industry in the United States, which goes back to the early part of the century, is dedicated to that. That's a pure business operation, and they're dedicated to it. Everything from.
So, yeah, I dropped the link. You ain't got the link. It ain't dropping. That's what I'm saying. I'm seeing Cleaner in the chat, but I'm not seeing you in the chat for some reason, which is weird. But yeah, here's a link. I don't know if it's popping up or not, but let me come over here and drop it over here. And let's see. Let's see. Oh. What up, though? Oh. It's in the chat, so I don't know. Let me drop it over here, but you don't see the link, Dominic? Because I don't see you in the dang gum chat. Now, why is it not showing the chat over here? I should be able to. I'm not on my channel. That's why. Yeah, Dom. The link is in. The link is in the chat. Yeah, I agree with that, Cleaner. That's a refutation against eugenics, right? Because with eugenics, they was trying to say you could have, you could have two smart parents, and majority of the time you have a smart kid. So they were trying to say intelligence can be inherited and all that type of stuff, but there was really no proof of it. But anyway, I don't know why you can't see it, Dom, but it's in the chat. Try to repost it if you can, Cleaner, because I can't even see him in the chat, which is weird. Yes, sir. Okay, so he was talking about, oh yeah. So I want to give y'all something, right? One of the don't get me on eugenics, bro. Do not get me on eugenics, because that's another conversation we could go on and on and on about. I love eugenics, the concept of it. Not I love it in a good way, but it stimulates my mind in a different type of way. But the concept of like manufacturing consent, and also the concept of oh yeah, the source I want to give y'all. There's a great documentary, one of my favorite documentaries of all time. It is called Century of the Self, and it's on YouTube, and it's about 4 hours long. If you got the attention span for it, check this thing out, and it will blow your mind. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Edward Bernays, and his relationship with Freud. You know, the father of psychology. This documentary explores the relationship between Bernays and Freud, and they are nephew and uncles, and what they did with propaganda. You know what I'm saying? It'll blow your mind. If you have time, watch this documentary, and it'll give you a whole new outlook on how to see the world. It's one of my all-time favorites. It's on YouTube. It's called Century of the Self, right? Great documentary. So yeah, man. I don't know how to share your referral link. But I don't know how to fucking pin the link. I don't know how to do that. So yeah, and it's all about really manufacturing consent. He named his book, Chomsky named his book Manufacturing Consent, but really Bernays and Freud's theories and in practice, that's what they really did, man. Made people consent with dealing through their emotions and through propaganda, and directed the world masses through propaganda in a way that we can't even fathom. Like, we all agree that propaganda is influential, but if you watch this video, they'll give you direct correlations on how it is, how massively influential it is. You'll get to see that, okay, these companies come to these guys and say, listen, I want to get this done. And they come up with some propaganda, push it onto the world, and you see that shit get done in real time, in a massive way. And it's just mind blowing. It's mind blowing. So yeah, I believe that Chomsky actually took that phrase from, Bernays and Freud with propaganda and manufacturing consent, because essentially that's what they were doing, controlling the masses.
Advertising to other mechanisms of influence, and which they openly call, and their more honest days, they openly call propaganda. And the same is true of much of the intellectual class. The more sophisticated people recognize that their job is thought control, and they argue that it's the right thing, because the bewildered herd will only get into trouble if you let them rage on by themselves. You'll notice, of course, the close similarity to Leninist ideology, to Bolshevism, which also assumes that the radical intellectuals.
Again, I might come over there. I might. If you'll be over there, I might show up. But that should just be mad long. You know what I'm saying? Mad long. But my question is to you, Cleaner. Is it a valid position that if you create something like a country and you want to keep it in your family, is it valid to keep people out by through every means necessary? Right? I mean, us at the bottom, we don't like that, and we don't feel that is right. But if you created something and you want your family to be able to participate in it, like, as long as you can, you put measures in place, you put rails in place to ensure that. I ain't mad at that, but at the same time, I'm mad at that because I didn't do it. You know what I'm saying? So you just gonna blackball me? You gonna keep me out? You know what I'm saying? We'll go a little bit longer. It switches to a different interview. He's going to kind of reiterate over the same points like I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? But it's still good stuff. Check it out.
Are the specialized class, the vanguard, They've got to lead the stupid and ignorant masses to a better society. In fact, the two conceptions are very much alike. I think that's probably one of the reasons why there's been historically such an easy transition from one to another. The move from being a Leninist enthusiast to a passionate supporter of state capitalism and working for American aims, that takes place overnight. It's been going on for years. It's called the God that failed transition. And it happens very simply. And the transition is very easy, I think, because there isn't much of a difference in ideological change. It's just a matter of where you think power lies. If you think there's going to be a popular revolution and you can ride that revolution to state power and then wield the whip over the masses, you're a Leninist enthusiast. If you see that that's not going to happen and power lies in the state capitalist institutions, which you have to serve as a manager, an ideological manager, you do that. But it's basically a very similar position. And in fact, in the last...
That's how I see whenever he say we have these ideological managers. Don't let me forget that point, Clean. I'm about to read your comments. Ideological managers, right? So it's valid for us from our perspective. The thing is that all humans want their families to prosper. And so we try to build generational wealth of some kind for our kids and their kids, for sure. Okay. The problem with generational wealth is not the fact that we all want it for our families and kids. It is that the elite sap the capability from everybody but themselves. Agreed. And and they pass it down. Like you said, that's the problem. Yeah, that nobody else can get in. So yeah, you say that it's valid from our perspective. I would say it is not valid from our perspective. You know what I mean? But it's valid from their perspective. Invalid from our perspective, valid from their perspective. But if you're in that position, then you're gonna do the same thing. I think most people would. You know what I mean? So the concept, he keeps talking about these ideological managers, right? So he's trying to imply that there are people in place who push these narratives on purpose, right? You have these elitist people. And in politics, like, we think that politics is serious. But these people are doing this shit to keep us bewildered on purpose. You know what I mean? So these are the ideological managers, right? That's pushing the narrative, pushing the propaganda machine, the news channels. You know what I'm saying? These are ideological managers. They keeping the fantasy in front of your face. They keeping the American dream alive in your face. And not only is that, it's programming you, it's getting embedded in your soul. You becoming a patriot. You know what I'm saying? You becoming so patriotized that you can't even see through the woods. You know what I'm saying? You cannot see because you're so steeped in it and you're embedded in the ideology, right? And you believe it and it's on your heart that you can't step outside of it and see what's really going on because you were bred in it. You were programmed in it. You're a part of it. You believe in it. You want it to work, but it's actually working against you. So in the great words of Harriet Tubman, right? There was a quote and they asked her, they said, how do you feel about slavery? Like, how was that? She said, I would have freed more slaves if they had known that they were slaves, right? That's deep as hell, right? Imagine being born, right, into slavery, right? And you accept it as just your reality, like you don't know no better. So when somebody come to save you and try to bring you out of slavery, you look at them and say, who gonna treat me better than master? Like, where the hell am I gonna go? And they also made you believe that God intended you to be a slave at that. So not only do you believe in slavery, you actually don't even understand that there is an alternative to what you've been born into, right? Like what's better than America? Are you crazy? We in the land of the milk and honey, the home of the free and the brave, right? Don't even know you a damn slave in so many aspects of the world. You know what I mean? So you got to think about that. Like, you don't know what you don't know. You feel me? You do not know what you don't know. Like, you could be in slavery, but whenever you're born in it, you don't never know. You remember that the Truman Show? That's the same concept, right? He was born in that thing. You know what I mean? And didn't even know that he was in a prison. There's such thing as a nice prison. We've seen them rich people go to them, right? But imagine your whole ideology is around that. You know what I'm saying? Like your whole life, you just born into it and don't even know that this thing is actually to keep your mind hostage. Right? Like a lot of people can't even espouse on a different type of ideology to believe in as far as organization of the government, right? Can't even fathom it, you know, in a realistic way. All the other things besides democracy and a republic are all demonized, so you don't even consider it as a real option. You know what I mean? What's up, Don? You there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. I had to turn it up, the microphone a little bit. Sorry about that.
No, you good. So what you think so far?
Well, I usually try to get a little bit more sideways in some of these conversations. To entrain us with the language is part of the slavery, unfortunately, or enslavement. So, you get us as kids, go to a schooling system, use the language. Next thing you know, we've been enslaved. So they'll throw words after, because once you've been in trade, words like freedom of speech, free will, master, slave, constitutions. Once a person understands, okay, so I'm actually looking precariously from within, outside. So how do I actually break free from that? Well, you first have to know where you stand. And then realize how most of us have actually fallen into it. Probably even the people that we call the elites, they just do it willingly.
I agree. And then, like you said, controlling the language is a big part of like controlling the people's reality, right? If I control the words in your vocabulary, like there can be concepts that exist outside of your consciousness, outside of your vocabulary, right? Imagine it being concepts that exist that you don't even have the verbiage for. It don't exist in your lexicon. Like you can't describe something that you don't have a definition for, and you can feel it, but you won't even know what it is. Things can be pressing on you so bad, working against you so tough, but you don't have the words in your vocabulary to understand how this thing can be working against you, to have no conception of it.
I think that's what it sucks you back in. This is why when we hear people say in past, eye of the beholder and Plato's cave, they're talking from the observing point of view. And as you try to speak it or read it, you've been anchored now. So as in this where people used to talk about symbology, you would see symbols. So right there is telling us that we've been entrained with our senses. I'm seeing it, I'm hearing it, I'm touching it. So if a person thinks that I want to be free, well, then where'd you get the concept of slavery then? And a lot of us get anchored, a lot of us get anchored back, and then we start using verbiage such as black and white, male and female, without challenging those words.
Yeah. So what do you think about, so we often had this conversation because, everybody, everybody wants this ideal situation to where everybody is just one, the human race, right? So should people then do away with their traditions and heritage then? Because you lose that if we all become one identity. So I think is that a conflict? Is that a hindrance, or can we do both?
I think we can respect each other and our differences in the human part, culturally and all that. But for most people, they've lost respect for one another. So, and usually what they do is it's all about me, me, me. But yet, stop and realize, but most of the stuff that you haven't even created. Women will say, I created a child. No, you reproduce. There's a reason why we have those languages. So they've reproduced. We hear words like cause and effect. No, we're living in the effect and side effect. Unless we actually understand where language comes from or where air is, we could speculate what the word cause means. So again, there's the human race, but we're also classified as human beings. There's the essence to what we call the human part. That's a tough one for a lot of people to spin because there's so many indoctrinations that's going to reinforce, well, I don't believe in all of that. Well, who's to say this is about believing? Well, I don't know about that. I said, well, who says this is about knowing? This is about discernment. Oh, so where do I see language when I speak it? Where do I see air when I use the word? Well, you don't see air, but you see the effect of air. You'll see a leaf, but you still don't see air. And that's probably the most valuable thing that we probably need. And then right after that is water. After water is food.
So you don't believe that people create the words and the definitions, especially. So it's one thing whenever you have like abstract concepts versus things in nature, right? We know that things in nature are what they are. But when we deal with something like, here's what things get foggy is when we start dealing with abstract ideas, right? Mm-hmm. For instance, government, right? Because government doesn't exist in nature, but we created a word and we defined it and we gave it a physical representation on earth, which is, a brick and mortar. And then we have these actors and we call it the government as if it's an entity unto itself, but it's just something out of the imagination of the man, right? And we can tweak it how we want to tweak it. So a lot of these words, as far as the abstractions that have a physical representation on earth, I believe these are man's toys. We can play with them and do with them as we wish. I don't think there's no objective definition to abstract concepts that we ourselves have made up. For instance, love, right? We tend to think that love is something in and of itself that's independent of man, but it could be a toy of the mind, right? We feel it as an emotion, or we believe that we do. People believe that love exists independently of men. I'm not so sure, right?
Well,
these are my opinion. You don't have to agree or disagree, but
you won't get that from me. Yeah, you won't get that from me, to me, that's too limited because I'm never going to see it through your senses. So I can't agree or disagree with that. I can hear you, hence respect. So what I'm hearing is, yes, they are constructs, but do you know anybody in your short lifespan that created the language? No. Mandarin, Sanskrit, body language, all of those things, it's kind of already been here. So now, when I look at the word love and I go inwards intuitively, what most people call love, I love my children. No, that's duty and obligation. That's conditional. So now, if there's something that all of us share in common, and even the plant kingdom and also the animal kingdom is breath of life. Mm-hmm. It's unconditional. I could be in an elevator, I'm still breathing it. I can be underwater, I'm still breathing it. So that's unconditional. That's where I would put the energy of love, just to put a word. Because again, most words, especially when you speak it in English, it's a meaningful language. So we're trying to put meaning to it. So when somebody says the word hate, they're going to try to put a meaning to it, opposed to, but wait a second, there's many other language. Sanskrit's a healing language. Greek is a comprehension language. That's why when they used to philosophize, that would be more the suitable language to speak. Mm-hmm. If you're going to speak it, because then now we're talking about sounds and frequencies. And of course, most of us are going to be in a mortal form. So we're never going to truly have a wise person that's lived for who knows how long, and they're going to give us speech patterns. So we get the written work that is so dumbed down. When I say dumbed down, what it does to the hemispheres, when you read a book from left to right or right to left, it really entrains us, let alone if you put it in a scroll form, let alone if you read it from the bottom up. Again, that's all conditioning. All of that. Every single thing I just said is conditioning. And once one becomes aware of it, oh, I'm inside of the program. There you go. You figured it out. Where most people think, I'm going to see outside of the box. At that point, they're full of shit.
Right.
Because they're using a language to try to describe it. The word gives it away to describe it. And then once a person discerns, wait a second here, I'm saying the word tree, but I don't see it on that object. So then where is the word tree? And then somebody beside you speaks it in Hebrew, another speaks in Mandarin, another speaks it in Latin. So therefore, the word tree does not exist outside.
You said the word tree or free?
What's that? Tree. It doesn't matter. At that point, anywhere we could put in there. You know, it's kind of like, what tool do you have and what name are you going to give to it?
Right.
And we've been conditioned, right?
No, exactly. I agree with that completely. Some people believe that, you know, words have objective meanings. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know about that. Some people believe that you have number and word correspondence with words and with numbers, and numbers have frequency and meaning and all that. Then you have, what's it called when the people, gematria and all this type of stuff. Like, I'm not completely against that, none of that stuff, but I have never seen nobody like substantiated. You know what I'm saying? Now, I do believe, like what you said, like sounds and stuff have frequency, and frequency can affect reality. Now, I do believe that. But once you start talking about like magic numbers and putting numbers with letters and having some type of meaning outside of what it already means, I'm just not so sure. You know what I mean? Like,
that's a good position to be in. Sorry, I was going to say that's a good position because now you're at the beginner's mind. So, for example, the concept of black and white, that's actually designated for magic. Black is the unknown, and white or light is for the known. So now,
but hold on, Don.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you good. I just want to deal with one concept at a time, right? Because you said the concept of black and white. Well, you have the concept of black and white, but then you also have black and white. The colors are, you know, colors and not colors. So you moved it to the symbolic realm, though. So now we're not talking about black and white, the physical colors that actually exist in reality. We're talking about the symbolic nature of black and white and how we see it in language.
Yes, this is why when certain people might have a gift and they can play a musical instrument and they can literally see colors. I got to give them the benefit of the doubt. No different if I saw Usain Bolt running under 10 seconds. I can't run under 10 seconds. So therefore he has a gift. No matter how hard I try. We all have our different gifts. Some people are intuitive. So black it encompasses all colors. White is absence of color. So when I hear humans saying, well, we're black and we're white, I said, you've been indoctrinated. You have different shades. And a European, if they get tanned, might stand beside a guy from Barbados and said, today I'm actually more dark skinned than you are. So what they're doing is they're playing with the flesh and blood game. They're trying to get people distracted from the spiritual part, meaning that where does language exist? Where does, when somebody says to me, Dom, I had a near-death experience. I said, do you understand what the word death means in the tarot card? Not really. It means transformation. So when you had a near-death, what you're really saying is you had a near transformation. Go to the light. No, absent of the light. So again, people want to talk about the enlightenment. So in this case, once you open up your eyes, you're in the conscious state. And at that point, for most people, they're playing with only limited senses. You know, this is why they use the word common sense. But meanwhile, there's many senses. No different, most of us, there's many languages, but I'm not going to learn all the different languages in one lifespan.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's necessary to learn every single language because, you know, concept to concept. I don't think it's the language. I think it's the concept behind the language, right? And not all concepts transfer to different languages, right? And then also, you know, you said something else that I wanted to speak to. As far as
it's recorded. So I always tell my buddies, I said, if it's recorded, you've listened to it consciously. Play it when you're in your subconscious state. It'll pick it up. Right. You know, and we're using a word, construct. There's a reason why it's a con.
That's what I was going to say. You brought me right back to it. So words are fickle like that too, right? Because whenever you deal with the etymology of words, like people use whichever sense that they want to use. Like you have connotation and denotation of words, right? Like what they generally mean and what the definitive definition, but then you have the etymological definition, right? Words morphing through history, right? And you just got to know the context and where the origin of a word, right? So, like you said, you can be having a conversation with words, and somebody could be using the original meaning of the word, you know what I'm saying? And you're
You got
using
it.
the more modern term, and you could be having two different conversations. You could be talking right past each other. Person
That's
talking
right.
in code right in front of your face, using the same language but different meanings.
That's why when
So,
people use the word government, the word mint was formed in Latin, meaning mind, not the brain, the mind. And this is where some people talk about the word man, M-A-N. So again, and then of course, if we're talking about energies, and this is for the ones, and you're probably aware of this, where now when we're speaking certain words, these are things called afterthoughts. We're speaking now into here, no different when we're writing here. Now we start playing with the old calendars, the
so
lunar
let me
calendar.
ask you this. Let me ask you this before you move forward to the calendar part. So, do you think that words? So, let's say like you took the word government, right?
Yep.
And you said govern. We know what governance means, and then you said meant as mind. So, we're talking about governing the mind. So, originally, is that fair?
Well, everything is in the mind.
No. I'm just saying,
Okay,
as
go
far
ahead.
as the definition that I gave, would you agree to the definition as far as how you brought it when you say that the original Latin, you said govern, which I'm assuming govern is the same thing in Latin, and then meant is mind. Then
Mhm.
we have the word govern the mind, or mind governed, right?
Yes, it's governing the mind. Yes, no different.
So,
Settlement, entertainment. There's a lot of
so
words
here's
with the word mint in it.
here's the question, right? Now we know what government mean today, which is more about the physical. You know what I'm saying? But my question is to you: do you think that can affect people in a material way, in a physical way, right? If there was the original meaning of govern mind, and the way we see it today, and we don't know that original meaning, how does it affect us? Because people will say, like you said, like you bringing up, people don't even know what it means. It means to govern the mind, but how does that affect us today, and other ways? You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, then we have to throw in other words. Mind over matter. There's a reason why that's spoken. Mind over matter. So here's the mind, the energy that we can't see. It governs over top of the matter. And what's in matter? Blood and water. That's why when people speak it, we're actually resonating with our liquids in our body. It's not just about when people say, I can communicate with water. You can communicate with the blood, no different with gold, silver. Again, a lot of us get caught up in what's called the evil world, the material world. And they say, yeah, but I see everything objectively. I said, but what are you describing it with? You're describing with words that you can't see. Yeah, but I wrote it down and said, that's dumbed down. I said, you're not seeing energy at that point. This is where people talk about auras. They talk about astral traveling. They talk about all that's energy at that point. Air is energy. But again, we've been so indoctrinated, and people struggle. They're like almost like fish out of water. And what they do is they defend or attack something they don't understand. I'm giving the word understand. It's humble when a person says, I understand. It's not somebody else's responsibility to understand me. This is
Right.
where people talk about the tree of life, not the tree of knowledge. To know things is great. I could know Sanskrit. Doesn't mean I understand how that language is wielded. Same with numbers. Numbers have energy with each one. But for most people, they use it because they've been taught 1 + 1 = 2. And then I say, okay, what's 2 and 2? They'll say 4. I said, did I say plus or equal? No, so they don't even know how to follow within.
Yeah,
So
man. Yeah.
that's called paying attention, truly paying attention from within. So what me and you do is we're hearing each other. But what people should be doing is listening from within. This is where the upper brain and the lower brain, the gut brain, starts communicating. And for women, they're preset because they're able to childbear. So their gut brain communicates what's called the mind. What's most men end up doing, they get caught up in their masculine energy and they start talking about scholarly and scribe kind of ideals. They'll debate about what they read or what they've spoken about. I said, but are you intuitive with it? Are you insightful with it? Are you intelligent with it? Well, not really. I said, so then how's that serve you then? And then they play this out game. Well, I won an argument. I said, you don't even see my views. So I'm just sharing out loud at that point. I get it. We've been conditioned with the concept of winning and losing. If me and you were playing chess, I say, you know something, dude, play whoever knows how to play chess, but play it differently this time. Don't give a damn if you win or lose.
No, I think you made a great point, and I think that's how I look at it too. Regardless of what we believe, the question is how does it serve you? Me at the end of the day. So we can come up with all these, constructs, the way that we see things. Like if it's serving you in a real way in real time, or maybe even potentially in the future, then that's when it has value for me. A lot of people believe in, different things, different constructs, different beliefs that ain't gonna never serve you. You know what I mean? So what's the purpose? You know what I mean? So I try to get away from those things that are magical and all these things that make you feel good but don't serve you, and they give you a pleasurable feeling. You get dopamine hit, you get a fairy tale, you get fantasy. You know what I'm saying? And it can serve you in that way, and it can keep you, blind to reality. But I don't want to be wrapped up and believing in things that don't benefit me, that don't serve me. I don't serve reality, don't serve the masses, because me, myself, I want to do things that serve the world, you know what I'm saying, and my family and myself.
Well, you're directional that way, where for some people, they might not understand all this other stuff. So then they have to be honest with the self, hence the concept of know thyself. So when they're honest with the self, so I'm working for fiat currency or money, whatever word they want to use. So how does it serve me, or do I serve it? Forget about whether or not other people are talking about woo-woo stuff, crystals and all that. Let's talk about what you know. So in this case, that person says, why value? I want to be able to earn money. I said, sure. Wouldn't you want to understand the people that actually print the money? Well, not really. I said, so you want this by default. So now at that point, that person's trying to choose to be ignorant, consciously ignorant. Where I said, but you're going to work so hard for it. But a lot of people want to be entertained. It'd be no different if you want to learn sports. Okay, I want to be entertained by sports, but do you also want to understand a little bit what these men or women have to do to be good at their craft? Well, not really. So you just want to be entertained. Well, it's okay. And as long as they're honest with themselves, but most people are not honest with themselves. Even on YouTube, I find it still humorous when people say, okay, we want to have a personal conversation. Then why are you hiding behind the third persona? What do you mean? You came in with the given name. This is why when actors talk about third persona, they understand the energy. If I come in as a pretend actor's name and then I have the name Brad Pitt, that's second persona. That's not who they are. They're going by a name. But for a lot of people, if I can't Google your name or your forefather's name, but yeah, you want to have a personal conversation, that person's full of shit. And when I say that, I'm saying they're not being honest with themselves. Forget about me. I'm not included in the equation. And that's what most people do.
Another aspect of it is whenever you're not conscious of it, some people can be sincere whenever they say that. You know what I'm saying? They can be really sincere and genuine, but don't know that they don't know themselves in that way. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
I want to continue to comment on this video. You know what I mean? So let's move forward on this video. I don't know how much of it is good, because I think I'll stop right here, but we're just going to push on and see if we can find some more good stuff in here.
Century or so since there's been a more or less identifiable secular intelligentsia, I think you find typically that they fall into one or the other of these two categories. They associate themselves with one or the other system of power and hierarchy and subordination. In fact, what I just said is almost a tautology. It's only if you submit to those systems that you're counted as a respectable intellectual, for obvious reasons. Well, coming up to more modern times in the
I think that was an interesting point, especially coming from him, who is considered an intellectual, but he said, if you don't, submit to the system of pushing the agendas, they don't take you seriously. In other words, he said they gatekeep, right? They won't even let you in if you're trying to go against the system, if you're trying to bring something new, if you're trying to bring light to the ill nature of the system, you will never be in scholarship the way that you want to be. You know what I'm saying? Because they're pushing the ideology. So I think that's real, real insightful. If you really understand what he's saying, you know what I mean? That's where you get the term like gatekeeper and stuff like that. And also, he used the term ideological masters. I believe that's the term that he used. that, all these people's job is just to push the ideology, but really knowing in reality that, it's just propaganda to keep the masses confused. And you can jump in if you want, Don, if you have something to say. If not, I'll continue.
Yeah, at that point, you're on the outside looking in. And
Second World
they're
War
not.
period.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, at that point, that person's outside looking. They're not really concerned about them. Like, if they hear people talking about certain agenda they put out there, they use the word conspiracy theory. Okay, so they're actually pushing our ideology. Now, people might turn around and say, yeah, but we're fighting the system. You don't even got a concept of the system because you're the frog in the water at that point. It's when people start realizing, oh, okay, so using two words together is like using two different chemicals. So the word conspiracy is one thing, theory is another word. Now, if you use the word conspiracy facts, that's another kind of meaning. You use the word conspiracy agenda, now you're talking about what they're trying to do. And whoever they may be, and it comes in many forms. They could be the World Bank, United Nations, they could be the G8, they could be the Illuminatis. They're everywhere. People that are in clubs, they might not even understand how the hierarchies work. There's people that are living in America or Canada, not realizing you're pushing the agenda, whether you're aware of it or not. Especially when you hear an American say, well, Dom, I'm defending my country. I said, not when you're in somebody else's country.
Right. And that's the whole point. And it's wise for the people that's in power to do that. You know what I mean? It's a masterful play. It's a beautiful play. Like, I give them respect on how they do it. Mm-hmm. So, like, I think of this. Let me give you this example, Don. So I take something like the Magna Carta, right? And the Magna Carta is when the people came and beheaded the king because the king was outside of law. He was outside his own rules. Like, he was enforcing the law on people, but it didn't apply to himself. So the people got sick and tired of it, came and, chopped his head off. And then the Magna Carta it was like, hey, nobody is above the law, right? After the Magna Carta, you go a little further in history, you get Europeans coming over here, and do what they do, establish a government. And how I see it is that, they learned that lesson, right? They learned that lesson that you don't want to consolidate power all in one person because something like that can happen. What do? You divvy out the power to these, puppet heads, and then you can be still the master from behind, and you don't have to worry about stuff like that. You also give people, fake votes and, hope that they actually participate in this type of thing. And so I think that was a masterful play also. And this is a conspiracy of mine. It may not have went like this. I gave you facts, but I'm connecting dots that may not connect. But I look at stuff like this, and I believe what he's saying is true as far as, the elite, are at the top, and they are the masses and the people that control most of everything. And the people at the bottom are economic slaves and being, programmed by politics.
Well, if I can share it, it's a play on words. So who are the masters? They're the middle management. They're not the hidden hand. So now, when the people had enough of the king that they put in there, they removed them. Now, the play on word is because they actually condition the masses to think that they're citizens, and they condition to be self-absorbed. When they say words like the people, they're not talking about the masses. Those are classified as nobles. That's why the Constitution was written the way it was. We the people and our prosperity. We the nobles and our bloodlines. They came from Britain, and they say, okay, the monarchy says we can come over here. Now they changed that in 1800, and now they're hiding behind corporations.
So let me ask you this: where do you get the correspondence with people being noble? How do you make that connection?
That's an intuitive thing, because it's wordplay. So again, citizens don't have rights. Now,
I agree that there is difference, and that's why there are distinctions. Like you said, you have people, and then you have citizens with the little c, and then you have citizens with the big C too, all in law and legal jargon, legalese.
Well, legalese. See, now this is where we got to play with legalese. So now they talk about policies. They distract citizens with the word laws. It's not laws. Nature has laws: land, air, water, and space. And it has boundaries over nature, which is wild and untamed. What humans create are policies. And then now we have Commerce Court. But what they do is, let's give them the word, they'll play with it. They might even put a meaning to it, but they're not understanding. So then what's the boundaries over this realm?
Well, I think you have two distinctions. I think you have like natural law, and then you have man-made law. You know, and it's artificial. It's a knockoff. It's not the same. I agree with you, but in practice, you know, it's similar. You know what I'm saying? That's just how, like you said, it's a play on words. But if you can get people to follow it like it is, then effectively it's the same thing. You know what I mean?
Again, if you go as the observer, you're going to realize nature and what men create, MEN, are two different things. One is actually in chi, the other one isn't. So when we look at nature, it's in harmony. It's both constructive and destructive. What humans create, it's just there. So now, that's why I say, once you distinguish the difference and say, that's just a policy, they're going to keep on saying it because most people reinforce it. This is why people that wear masks, like a Muslim culture, the gatekeeping is done among their own. It's not done from them. You know, you only have to train the first sheepdog and the first sheep and then watch each person have offsprings and then they do the conditioning. So it's like the word news, north, east, west, south. So again, these are words, these are lemma, these are acronyms of fours now, not acronyms of threes. This is where people use CIA and all that. There's a reason why people say 777. I said, but what about 4 sevens? What are you getting now? Or what about when you see 4 ones?
Are you familiar with Jordan Maxwell? You probably like a lot of his.
Yeah, Jordan Maxwell, yeah. He got a lot of the stuff from Manly P. Hall. Yes.
Yeah, he was a beast. Let's keep moving forward.
Go ahead.
Period. You find, again, a deep concern over the need to control and deceive the public, to control the public mind. Presidential historian Thomas Bailey wrote in 1948, at the time when we were sort of setting off on a new war, the Cold War. He wrote, because the masses are notoriously short-sighted and generally cannot see danger until it's at their throats, our statesmen are forced to deceive them into an awareness of their own long-run interests. Deception of the people may in fact become increasingly necessary unless we're willing to give our leaders in Washington a freer hand. And in 1981, as the United States was launching a new crusade for freedom, Samuel Huntington, the professor of government at Harvard, said in a private but published discussion, interchange, you may have to sell intervention or other military action in such a way as to create the misimpression that it is the Soviet Union that you're fighting. That's what the United States has been doing ever since the Truman Doctrine, which is quite accurate and gives a certain insight into the nature of the Cold War, in particular into the nature of the war against Nicaragua, which is what he specifically had in mind. Well, these concerns over controlling the public mind tend to rise to the surface, particularly after periods of wars and turmoil, like the 17th century revolution, the Civil War, or like the First World War, when Woodrow Wilson launched the major Red Scare, which is the major example in modern American history, all of American history, of state repression. That was really large scale and effective in destroying unions and destroying independent politics and eliminating independent thought and so on. And the same thing happened after World War II with the phenomenon that's mislabeled McCarthyism. It's mislabeled because it was actually initiated by the liberal Democrats in the late 1940s. McCarthy just came along at the tail end of it and vulgarized it a little. The reason for this is that periods of wars and turmoil have a tendency to arouse people from apathy and to make them think and to make them organize often. So that's why you get things like the Red Scare and McCarthyism right after periods of war and turmoil. And the same thing happened after the Vietnam War, which had the same effect. After the Vietnam War, elites were concerned about what they called a crisis of democracy. In fact, one of the most interesting books on this topic, or one of the most interesting books on, most of the insightful books, I think, on the modern democratic system, is called The Crisis of Democracy. It's a study, the only book-length study published by the Trilateral Commission. It's an important group put together by David Rockefeller in 1973, and it represents the more or less liberal internationalists from the three major centers of modern capitalism: the United States, Western Europe, and Japan, hence trilateral. And remember, this is the liberals. This is the group out of which Jimmy Carter and most of his administration came. What's the crisis of democracy that they're concerned with in all of the democratic societies? Well, the crisis is that during the 1960s, large groups of people who are normally passive and apathetic began to try to enter the political arena to press their demands. And that's a crisis which has to be overcome. So the naive might call that democracy, but that's because they don't understand. The sophisticated understand that that's a crisis of democracy. The American spokesman, again, Samuel Huntington, wrote in his report that
think that was a mouthful right there. You know, they don't really want us to participate in democracy like we think they do. They don't want us to participate in democracy like we think they do. You know what I mean? So I want to run that back on what he said.
Eve might call that democracy, but that's because they're concerned with in all of the democratic societies. Well, the crisis is that during the 1960s, large groups of people who are normally passive and apathetic began to try to enter the political arena to press their demands. And that's a crisis which has to be overcome. So the naive might call that democracy, but that's because they don't understand. The sophisticated understand that that's a crisis of democracy. The American spokesman, again, Samuel Huntington, wrote in his report that Harry Truman had been able to govern the country with the cooperation of a relatively small number of Wall Street lawyers and bankers. In those days, there was no crisis of democracy. Things were working just right. But in the 1960s, you got all this turmoil. I mean, young people and women, labor, I mean, all kinds of weird people who were supposed to be sitting quietly in the corners began to get involved and caused this crisis. I mean, the same crisis that arose in the 17th century and that repeatedly arises when people begin to try to take advantage of the formal opportunities that exist. Among the terrible things that were happening during the 60s causing this crisis, they said, was that you had this group of people who they called value-oriented intellectuals, people who were concerned with things like truth and justice and all that sort of nonsense, and they're opposed to the good guys, the technocratic and policy-oriented intellectuals. They called them the commissars, the ones who just do the job. But you had these value-oriented intellectuals, and they were doing all sorts of horrible things like delegitimizing the institutions that are responsible for the indoctrination of the young, like schools and universities. Remember, this is an internal discussion, so they kind of let their hair down. Their general proposal at the end of all of these lengthy and thoughtful discussions was that what we need is more moderation in democracy to mitigate the excess of democracy and to overcome the crisis. In plain terms, what that means is that the public has to be reduced to their proper state of apathy and obedience and driven from the public arena if democracy is to survive in the appropriate sense, with the specialized class, the cool observers, smart guys, the technocratic and policy-oriented intellectuals, doing our job in the interests of the people who have real power.
So my question is concerning democracy, right? I feel like, I don't even know if I should say I feel like, but I believe that, that the common public have been dumbed down. I think there was a point in history to where the education of the common people went up. And I'm talking about from the Renaissance moving forward, right? Whenever technology, science and stuff was advancing at a rapid rate, and they weren't really consolidating knowledge like they used to, and it was getting pushed out to the masses. Well, I think the elitist people come to the conclusion that it does them a disservice to have smart laborers, right? Because if you want to stay in power, you don't want to have your people smart. So the point that I'm trying to get to is that the issue with democracy is also with the elitist people dumbing down the population. Because how can you have a good democracy at the same time dumb down the people? So it may not be the system itself that's the issue, but the people that's trying to sabotage the people from being competent enough to participate in it. You know what I'm saying? Democracy wouldn't be so bad if people were competent enough to participate in it in a substantial, progressive way. That's the issue. So there wouldn't be a crisis of democracy if people were competent enough to participate in it in a competent fashion. I don't think most people are competent enough to participate in politics in a competent fashion. That's the issue as I see it. So it may not be democracy in and of itself. It may be the dumbing down of the people. And whenever you're not bright enough to vote in your best interest, and I don't mean just vote, but to act in your best interest, right? We have that herd mentality, right? We have, we praise personality instead of getting that policy, right? It's not about the people, it's about the policy. So I'm of the opinion right now, just had the epiphany because I did have an issue with democracy in and of itself, but it may be the dumbing down of the people. Something to think about.
Well,
Go ahead.
democracy is based on ruled by the people. And a person has to almost do it like a mantra and keep saying it over and over again and really ask yourself, what does it mean? So in this case, when they talk about ruling by the people, again, they're not talking about the peasants, the citizens. It's ruled by the people. Because the king did not want to have to rule all as conquest. So here, at one time, Britain, we'll call it the former Roman Empire, the Babylon Empire, it ruled over 90% of the Earth's surface because that's when they had boats and all that kind of stuff. To this day, they still rule everything. Just because they hand it over to people that they've got in their clubs that are Chinese or Indian, those two countries are still being ruled by the monarchies. Same with America. If a person really want to understand America, unless you have an allodial title, every time you go into a major city and you look at all the high rises, the land itself is being ruled by somebody else. Britain still rules that land. Now, people can say, but it's America. I say, yeah, you have what's called governors. You have people ruling over you. Now, when people hear things like that, in this case, the citizens, well, they're talking about me. I said, no, because you're self-absorbed. They're never talking about you. If you want to bear arms for them, literally the term means to bear arms. They're not talking about guns unless you join one of their institutions called the police force or the military. Until people can wrap their heads around it, they're reading it kind of like sideways. And they're like, well, that makes no sense. I said, so then again, go beyond your senses. So again, when we say words, we really have to really tighten it up inwards and say, okay, if I say this word, what am I really trying to mean? Because remember, English language has many meaning to it. Am I saying cool, meaning it's cool outside, or am I saying because my jacket looks cool? So that's energy. Go ahead.
The way that I get past some of these things and not knowing like the origin of the words and stuff like that, you can look at something and see how it operates and not necessarily understand the word. Let's take for instance like democracy, right? I don't necessarily need to know the word. I can look outside and examine the political system and see how it operates and kind of understand it. Now, I may not know the nature of it, where it comes from and things of that nature, but I can look at something, how it operates and understand it in principle without the word.
But again, this is where I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about this. There's something there to serve the whole time. The subconscious is there to serve. So now, when people give each other missed messages to themselves, they're having a confusing program. So the conscious mind is saying one thing, the subconscious says, yeah, but I'm picking up what it is. So when somebody puts it out there, people means noble, the subconscious is going to say, I'm going to process that information. The conscious mind is going to say, I'm going to defend and attack it. I said, why? Why would you defend it or attack it or say shit like I agree or disagree? Just take it for what it is. Once you become the observer, you'll realize how limited the experiencer is, because each word is its own experience, especially when you understand sounds and frequencies. So now in this particular case, these people, whoever they might, they understand energy. So when they say words, they're counting on most people to misunderstand it. Hence the word miss is where people get the concept of sin. You're misunderstanding, you're misleading yourself. You're not really grasping the fact that those words were designed that way. But the way most people are using it, they're bastardizing it, they're erroneously using it. So when they say we the people, they're not talking about the citizens at all. Most people might say, oh, I don't believe in being a citizen. I say, but you're still playing in the realm, aren't you? And if you find out they're satanic people, then you better understand their system. And their system doesn't really give a shit about humans. It's plug and play for them. Now they might turn, because I heard you talk earlier, most of these elite families, their middle management, like the Gates family, the Musk family, they're eugenics. They truly grasp the concept of depopulations, birth control pills, increasing the price of homes so people can't afford it. That's depopulation. And most people would say, okay, do you have a child? Well, yeah, how many? Two in, two out? No. So you have one child for two people. That's depopulation. Well, they can't do that. They could do whatever the fuck they want at that point. Because most people don't realize, are you creating the technology? Did you create the car? Well, no. Did you create Wi-Fi? Well, no. So then what did you create? This is humbling the self. And for a lot of people, they'll have a tough time with it. Well, I don't understand what you're talking about, Dom. Exactly, because you're so caught up in ideologies or you're into belief systems.
Right.
So I talk that way just because I realize if it disturbs them, it tells me that they're not developed emotionally. They get caught up in their emotions. Oh, Dom, I agree with you. I said, keep your ego in check. I don't give a shit if you agree or disagree with me. I didn't create anything here. I'm just getting to play.
Right.
And plus, I enjoy what you said earlier, too. Sincerity opposed to being serious or silly.
Indeed.
That's the liberal side. I won't go into what the reactionary side says about the matter. The most prominent modern American political scientist, Harold Lasswell, who's a leading figure in communications and such things, he wrote the article on propaganda in the International Encyclopedia of Social Sciences, which was published in 1933. And in it, he says that we should not succumb to democratic dogmatisms about men being the best judges of their own interests. They are not. The best judges are the elites, us smart guys, the cool observers, and we must therefore be ensured the means to impose our will for the common good, of course. This, he said, will require a whole new technique of control, largely through propaganda, because of the ignorance and superstition of the masses. Same.
And that's what I'm gonna leave off on. That was really the point of playing this video in the first place, right? We touched on it a few times about the different concepts of America, right? You have the concept of what the founding fathers intended America to be. And then you have the concept of America in which modernity, the ideology of America, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, all inclusive America. And then you have America, the corporation. And I think we have to keep in mind these distinctions, all of them exist at the same time. And then we also need to understand that, we cannot put our idealism before our realism, right? And what I mean by when I say that is like, yeah, I think we all would agree that the ideal of America, we want to manifest that, and that it's the positive thing. But realistically, we understand that we have a 1% that's at the top that own majority of the wealth, majority of the power, majority of the land that's actually dictating how things go and leading you to believe that America is one way and it's actually not. That really makes you believe that you have a say in things, a vote in things, an opportunity to actually get out of your class. Now, can people raise from like the lower class to the middle class and potentially even a high class, right? To me, that just means you're a high class slave. You still don't have any real power. You still don't have any vast majority ownership of land, which then gives you real power, don't have any real wealth, you know, and the power is always going to stay localized in the few people that founded the country. So I say that to say is, yeah, you can put your Americanness first, but just realize there's three different Americas, and America, one of those Americas might not put you first. Dominic, I appreciate you for coming in. I'm going to wrap this thing on up. You have any last words you want to say?
Thanks, Stu. I look forward to hearing more of you sharing in the future. Thanks.
Yes, sir. So my name is Due Diligence. This has been The Principles. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.